In July of 2020, Efrem Allen Jr. and Takesha Williams stayed with their 10-month-old son in a vacation rental home in Davenport, Florida, just outside the Walt Disney World resorts. Best of all, the small rental home had a swimming pool, just what was needed to beat the summer heat. But all of a sudden, the unthinkable happened. The couple took their eyes off their little boy for just a moment, and in doing so, he wandered off into the pool and nearly drowned.
Emergency services were dispatched to the home, but despite life-saving efforts, the child, who has not been named, had no brain activity when he got to the hospital, and he couldn't even blink his eyes. Emergency room staff recommended that Efrem and Takesha remove their son from life support, as the little boy would be forever in a coma with no brain activity. But the couple didn't want to do such a thing and were sent home with their son on a ventilator, a feeding tube, and home health care staff visiting 3 times a week for over 2 years. At some point in 2022, the couple changed home health care providers.
In October, Efrem and Takesha began to reject assistance caring for their son. The couple wouldn't answer when the workers knocked, pretending they weren't home. If the workers were allowed inside, the couple would request that their son not be woken up. Ultimately, it had been roughly 8 months since home health care staff had been allowed to do their job. Strangest part, the couple did not have to pay for the help they had been receiving from the home health care service. So the fact that they stopped accepting help was very odd and clearly had no financial motivation whatsoever. At some point, Efrem and Takesha began living separately, although it's unclear why. As Takesha was her son's full-time caregiver, she began receiving state benefits to be a stay-at-home mom. She was taught to change the little boy's trach tube and other needs. In recent months, Efrem had been coming to help her care for their son. But caring for a child that's in a coma with all sorts of special needs quickly became too much for the woman.
According to Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, quote, "They just got tired of him. They got tired of the intensive care this child needed, and as a result, this child lay there and suffered and suffered and suffered until finally there was no life left," end quote.
We'll get into the rest of the story in just 1 minute. Please stay with us for the following ad. It not only supports the show, but it helps us support local charities in our area. This week's episode has been brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm with over 800 attorneys operating in 49 states. Are you injured and don't know where to start? Whether you made an unfortunate mistake or if it's not your fault at all, Morgan & Morgan has your back. Submitting a claim for an injury doesn't have to be confusing. There's no need for you to visit law offices and sit through timely consultations. In 8 clicks or less, you can submit a claim to Morgan & Morgan without ever having to leave the couch. Morgan & Morgan has modernized the injury law process, making it so easy to submit a claim. You can submit your case details, sign contracts, and upload documents and medical records, all from your cell phone. Best of all, you only pay if they win. If you don't win your case, you pay nothing. All calls, meetings, texts, time, and effort put into your case are completely free of charge. If you're ever injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/themiserymachine or dial #law. That's #529 from your cell phone. Thanks, and back to the episode.
On the morning of May 12th, 2023, Efrem and Takesha noticed that their son was cold to the touch. His stomach was bloated, and his pulse oximeter was malfunctioning. Instead of immediately contacting emergency services, Takesha waited until 3 p.m. to call 911. When she finally made the call, she told dispatchers, and I quote, "This is really not an emergency. You don't need red lights and sirens, but we'd like fire to come over and check the baby," end quote.
When Bartow Fire and Rescue paramedics arrived at Unit 1205, located at 1503 Goldview Avenue, they found a little boy hooked up to a working ventilator. But there was just one problem. The little boy had no life inside of him, no pulse at all. He was literally rotting in his bed. The 3-year-old was rushed to Bartow Regional Health and was pronounced dead at 3:52 p.m. When medical staff removed his clothing and diapers, they noticed ulcers and large gaping wounds throughout the boy's body, some of which permeated his muscle tissue. His stomach appeared green in color with marbling. The little boy reeked of decomposition.
According to emergency medical personnel, the child had not been adequately cared for in months. He no longer had a rectum. Instead, there was a big gaping hole where his intestines and spinal column were completely visible. The medical examiner discovered that the little boy had sepsis, bilateral pneumonia, and stage 5 ulcers. It should be noted that many medical journals don't even recognize ulcers past stage 4. This is how bad this little boy was.
Photographs of the little boy were provided to Dr. Chad Rennie at Bartow Regional Health, who advised that the open sores were consistent with child neglect. These sores all over this poor boy's body were severe, resulting in permanent disfigurement.
So why did Efrem and Takesha wait so long to call 911? According to authorities, the couple knew that their son had large open sores but were too scared to seek medical attention because they feared that the Florida Department of Children and Families would take their other 2 children away. They expressed fear that people would assume they were neglecting their son, and they insisted that's not actually what was happening. However, that was precisely what had happened, and Florida DCF took their other 2 kids away. Thankfully, those children, aged 2 years and 10 months, appeared to be healthy.
On May 13, 2023, 25-year-old Efrem Allen Jr. and 24-year-old Takesha Williams were arrested and held in the Polk County Jail in lieu of $100,000 bond each. They were initially charged with negligent CA causing great harm, but those charges were later upgraded to aggravated manslaughter of a child.
It's up to parents to make the right decisions. And I suggest to you the right decisions haven't been made since this child was 10 months old and suffered a horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. The indication to us is the child has been comatose from the very beginning, to the point there was no reaction. The child couldn't even blink his eyes. The pictures were horrific. It was even more horrific for my detectives and supervisors who were there and had the horrible stench to go along with it. It is just, there's no words to explain it. And I've seen some really bad stuff in my career. I have never seen anything like this. You will never unsee this. If you live to be 100 years old, you will never unsee this.
According to Sheriff Judd, quote, "They let this baby rot and die in its bed. I've done this for 5 decades. I've seen some truly horrific events in my long law enforcement career, but I have never, ever seen anything as sad, as bone-chilling, and as sickening as what this baby suffered before finally perishing from the despicable acts of these 2 criminals. My prayer would be that the child was in a deep enough state that he wasn't aware of what was happening to him," end quote. Sheriff Judd's goal is to send them to prison for as long as he can. And in his words, quote, "And then from there, God's got to take over. God's not happy. And it'll be up to God past what the legal system can do," end quote. According to criminal defense attorney Rob Mandel, in Florida, a manslaughter charge is upgraded to aggravated manslaughter typically when culpable negligence is involved that leads to the death of a person. This person, according to Florida statute 782.07, has to be classified as one of the following: an elderly person, a disabled adult, a minor under the age of 18, or firefighters, paramedics, law enforcement officers, or medical technicians that were on duty. Maximum sentences for aggravated manslaughter are capped at 30 years, which is likely the most that these 2 could serve. However, as we've seen numerous times on this channel, parents charged in manslaughter deaths of their kids frequently do not get maximum sentences. Do you feel that based on the information we have available at this time, that a lack of premeditation from these 2 is a reasonable conclusion Or is murder a more fitting charge? Let us know in the comments down below.